Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome everybody to Season 4, Episode 6 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we help you prevail throughout the 2024 fantasy football season. I'm your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me is Nick Cap. Nick, we're recording on a Friday night. We're dropping this on a Monday. It is Mock Draft Monday. It's the third week of August. The football season is almost in full swing, at least the preseason. We unfortunately have injuries. Your drafts are coming up. It's that time of year. We're going to have college football in the next 6 days once this podcast drops.
Yeah, man, it's football season, and Nick and I say it 52 weeks a year. But you know, now we're actually in the heart of it. And I know Nick's a bigger college fan than I am. I'm a diehard NFL guy by heart. I spend every season looking forward to a successful Jet season that goes the opposite way. Haven't been in the playoffs since.
You don't actually look forward to a successful Jet season.
At least this year,
we're 25. I would say 23 out of your 25 years, you would not look forward to a successful Jets season.
Yeah, probably. I mean, listen, my Jets haven't been in the playoffs since Nick and I went to the same school in like 6th or 7th grade. So that's kind of where we're at. Not to age us too much, but you know, my Jets haven't been on the good side of football lately.
It should be this year. We've been talking Jets football, we've been talking Jets fantasy football a little bit, as we will be doing today. Another mock draft for you guys. Really want to give you guys a bunch of these mock drafts. You can see how the board flips, especially with injuries preventing things. We're going to draft them, we're starting in the first round, obviously. Maybe talk a little bit about Justin Jefferson and what his value is now with Sammy D, a former Jet, former USC Trojan as well. I had to get my little fight on in there as well. So a lot of stuff to talk about in this mock as we're drafting. We're drafting from new draft slots as well every single time. So you get a little bit of a different feel as to how we're mocking depending on the draft spot and how we're constructing our teams. With give you guys insight on draft strategies, sleepers, breakouts, and busts that we are avoiding in every round. If this is your first time listening to us, thank you so much. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Football Podcast. You could find us on all major audio streaming podcast platforms, as well as YouTube if you'd like an audio and video version. We'll be going live every Sunday morning during the NFL season, probably early on in the morning before ESPN and NFL Network fire up. So you get a little bit of fantasy insight from us bright and early on the morning to answer all of your fantasy football questions. Follow us, interact with us on all of our social media platforms, Primetime FF Pod and Primetime Fantasy Podcast on our YouTube. All right, so this is Mock Draft 4.0, as we stated. So last week, me and Nick took the ends of the draft. I had the 1 slot, and Nick had the 12 slot. Today, Nick is going to be drafting from the 2 slot, and I'll be drafting from the 10 slot. I was just given the 10 slot in one of my leagues, a league that I won in its inaugural season. This is now season 4 of that league. So we randomize the draft order every single year. So that's why I'm taking the 10 spot today. And it's not a spot that we have drafted. I've drafted on this show before. So Nick, I think you're going to hit start draft. I don't think I can. I think it's your mock. Okay. So sleeper through a curveball, Nick. So I'll let Nick take it away at that point.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the 101 to me is Christian McCaffrey. That is the guy I am taking if I'm at the 101. If I'm at the 102 and he's on the board, if he's on the board, you take Christian McCaffrey. Just get the pick right. Don't overcomplicate it. I love all the receivers. I usually like going receiver early, but it goes Christian McCaffrey, then it's the rest of the board. If I actually just did my tier-based rankings throughout the week to try and figure out who I like where. And I mean, it's literally just CMC in a tier of his own, and then it's the rest from there. So I'm going to go ahead and lock him right in.
And the interesting thing is, although Tyreek Hill did go first, I've seen some crazy things happen, including drafts in the past week. A friend's league drafted, I think 4 days ago, and Breece Hall ended up being the number 1 overall pick. Ooh. Me and Nick are both originally from New York, so it was probably a Jets fan that took him, but anything can happen. All right, so I'm on the board here. I'm picking at 10. I'm going to get the wrap back around, so it's 11, 12 at 14. So I'm looking at the board now. I really do like Garrett Wilson's upside, but I think there's an opportunity here for me to take a running back. But you know what? There are so many talented running backs now that I see it. So there are 4 draft spots in between. You're looking at Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, Kyron Williams, all guys that I'm okay with taking. I actually don't like the receivers after Garrett Wilson. And I really do like Garrett Wilson this year with Aaron Rodgers. My favorite pick here is probably Saquon Barkley, but I'm going to go with Garrett Wilson. I'm going to hope that a running back does come back to me. It does look like one will. So as I said, I would have really liked to take Saquon Barkley there. Did not come back to me, but I do have Jonathan Taylor and Kyron Williams as my 2 options here. JT's just been my guy. He won me a couple championships a couple years ago. I know he was banged up last year, but injuries happen to everybody. I'm going to go with JT. He's the trusted guy over there. He's playing behind a really good offensive line. He's comfortable with the coach. You know, Anthony Richardson's still a young quarterback, and although they have high hopes for him, they do need to still lean on the running game to not make Anthony Richardson throw 40 times a game. So I would have been okay with taking Jonathan Taylor or Kyron Williams there. I'm happy with my first 2 picks so far. I think I have 2 guys that are really solid options at both receiver and running back.
100%. And I have a lot of leagues where I'm drafting from the 9 and the 11. And I pretty much am only in 12-man leagues. And that's the spot I've gotten. And every single time it's Garrett Wilson in the first round because there is such a drop-off in wide receiver. And Nick, you believe in Jonathan Taylor. I believe in Kyron. I agree with you. It could go either way at that spot. So I think Nick starts the draft exactly how I wanted to. Looking at the top of my board, I am not loving the wide receivers.
I think you may want to double up on a running back here.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably what we're going to have to do. And it's not something that I pretty much encourage in fantasy football, but it's something that I'm going to look to do here just because I cannot trust taking Brandon Ayuk. And one of these other receivers will get back to me. The guy I like the highest on the board that I see is Deebo Samuel, but obviously I already have Christian McCaffrey, so I'm not making that stack. So we are going to go with who I think is going to be a monster breakout. I think Christian McCaffrey offers a safe floor, RB1. He should be if he's healthy, just like he pretty much has been every year of his career. Top 3 running back every season he's healthy. My number 2 is someone that I think is going to have a massive breakout season like plenty of people. I'm going with Devon Achane.
I'm so anti-Achane. I really am. I want no part of him. I just think that he's a smaller back. He's injury prone. We saw it last year. Mostert's still there. I could see him not being the Dolphins starter within a year or 2. And I know we're only talking about this year, obviously not dynasty, but the reason why I'm saying that is I think last season could have easily been a one-year wonder. And I think I'd rather trust a Derrick Henry, a Travis Etienne, a Josh Jacobs, even Pacheco. I think there's a couple backs I'd trust over Achane. I do have injury concerns. I have size concerns. And I have concerns that there's a lot of mouths to feed on that offense with it being Mostert, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. And they also has drafted a back that they like as well. So those are my concerns with Devon Achane. Mostly in a dynasty league, but even this year, there are other guys I like over him.
I think that's fair. I definitely think there's concern there. But if I'm looking at my team and I know I have CMC, I know Devon Achane's best weeks we saw last season, those 2 running backs win me weeks. So for me, I'm looking at who's going to win me weeks. And I think Achane with McCaffrey, that's probably the most upside that I can have. Rather than a guy like Henry, who's a safe floor play. He'll get like a dozen touchdowns. Jacobs is guaranteed workload. Travis Etienne as well. But I think the ceiling for Achane's through the roof. And I know we haven't really gotten into him this much this offseason because neither of us have really had him on the board when we're mocking. So that's fun to see that discrepancy. I am going to reach a little bit down the board. And when you're at the tail ends of the drafts, that's kind of what you have to do. To me, looking at the board, I only see one receiver left that I could potentially see finishing inside the top 3. And he's a bit further down the board, but he will not make it back to me. I'm going to go with Cooper Kupp. With all the Puka Nacua injury news, with all of the issues surrounding him, every report out of camp has been the offense is still running through Cooper Kupp. Puka has been sliding down the boards because of the injury. If he misses any time, it is Cooper Kupp's offense, and he is the number 1 receiver for a stat sheet stuffer. That is a formula for fantasy football success. We've seen it once before, Triple Crown winner, Super Bowl MVP, only a couple seasons removed. I have no doubt that Cooper Kupp at 100%, and it does seem like he is fully healthy this year, is a league winner. Even taking him a little bit higher in my rankings, I think I have him as like the wide receiver 8 or 9 right now. So I'm very comfortable where I have him going.
I'm going to do something interesting here that I don't normally do. So I don't love the board, Nick. Pacheco's fine, but I know I could get value at a different running back. I don't really want Jalen Waddle. I think there's a lot of ups and downs there, and he's wide receiver too. Stephon Diggs may be the odd man out over there on the Texans offense. We don't really know how that's going to go, so I don't want Stephon Diggs. And then I'm looking down the board here. Rashad White, he was fine last year, but I could see a drop off. He was better than fine. I shouldn't say fine. Michael Pittman, I like a lot. But I'm not seeing a lot that I like. So I'm actually going to go quarterback early, and I'm going to go with Lamar Jackson, somebody who always just garners a lot of rushing yards, a lot of rushing touchdowns. You want to talk about guys that could win you a week? I think Lamar Jackson is one of the few quarterbacks that could definitely put up 50 points in a week. Now, could he also put up 15 or 20? Sure. But I think he's one of the quarterbacks that could easily win you a week by just getting you 3 rushing touchdowns, equalizing to 18 fantasy points. So after Lamar went Mahomes, went Diggs, went Pittman, went Pacheco. So now I can kind of look down the board and see what I want to do. I don't want to bite on Malik Neighbors. Do have him on my dynasty team, though. Don't want to bite on James Cook. I'm really looking down the board and seeing what I like. I'm a big fan of Joe Mixon, and I'm a big fan of Kenneth Walker. Those are 2 guys that I am taking around this range. This time I'm going to go Joe Mixon. I think he has a lot of red zone opportunity and a lot of empty boxes he'll be facing over there in Houston. I talked about him a lot on the show already, but if this is your first time listening, I want to kind of make my point for Joe Mixon in rounds 4 to 5. With so much talent on the outside, you have Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, Nico Collins, and also Dalton Schultz. You can't load up boxes against Joe Mixon. So just going down the field, Joe Mixon is going to have to get some rushing opportunities. It's the same thing in the red zone. You can't load the box. It's going to be a lot of goal line opportunities for Joe Mixon. Also, there's a defensive-minded head coach coaching the Houston Texans. I think they'd like to control the clock a bit more. I don't think they want second-year quarterback C.J. Stroud throwing 50 times a game. Lean on the running back, and on top of that, they paid him, and they chose to pay him. Follow the money, and I'm going to go with Joe Mixon. But Kenneth Walker, who is still on the board, actually, Nick has 2 running backs, so he probably wouldn't go for another running back. But Kenneth Walker is still on the board. I think is a great pick in this next 10 picks, whichever team's going to get him. Yeah. I would say Team 6. If Team 6 can find a way to get Kenneth Walker, although I don't like the Waddle pick, I would have gone Kenneth Walker right there. But that would be a great start for Team 6 to go 4 receivers and then Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the strategy I see a lot of people leaning towards, and it's why wide receiver is so much more valuable, is either 0 running back or hero running back. You don't see a lot of teams this year, especially doing what I did, which is to double up on running back. And it's not like I mentioned, it's not a strategy I love. I just think if you get CMC and you don't love the receivers on the board, you take the who's your best available. So now I'm going to play a little bit of the board. I like the 2 tight ends. I think Mark Andrews, Dalton Kincaid. Andrew's clearly been reliable for fantasy for a long time. When he's out there, he has been elite. Avoided serious injury in a car crash, so good for him. And it sounds like he's returning to practice already, going to be good to go for the season. And Dalton Kincaid, I think, is going to have a major breakout season, being the number 1 target for Josh Allen. So I'm fine with either one of these. I see Team 1 does not have a tight end, so I'm going to take whichever one of those 2 fall back to me. But as I mentioned, I have 2 running backs. I have a need at receiver. I wouldn't go back and change my first 2 round picks, but knowing that Kenneth Walker and Kamara made it back to me, that's a great RB2. I'm going to lock in Devontae Smith. And Nick and I have both said in a previous episode, go check it out. Our top 5 offenses, bottom 5 offenses. We think that the Philadelphia Eagles are going to be the best offense in football for fantasy.
Just to chime in a little bit, I personally would have taken Andrews. I have Andrews ranked higher than Kincaid just because Andrews to me is Mr. Reliable. I think he was the tight end 3 or 2 last year before he got hurt. Him and Lamar just have an electric connection, and there's just no. Zay was very good last year too, but he wasn't his go-to guy. And the Ravens, I don't think they made our list of top 5s, but they do have a pretty high-powered offense, and they will score a good chunk of points. So and that's why I do like Andrew. I'll let you talk now, but I was just chiming in there.
Yeah. And I'm going to give a little sneak preview because Nick and I are going to have a second episode coming out later this week talking about our MVPs, who we think finishes at the 1, who we think is our breakouts at tight end. All 4 positions are breakout players, and who we think is going to be a bust or a letdown. And I can tell you right now, Mark Andrews and Dalton Kincaid are 2 guys that I'm going to talk about on that episode. So
all right.
We'll absolutely see what happens, but those are 2 guys I'm kind of all over in my drafts.
So I'm looking at the board here, and I'm kind of stoked. I don't have a lot of receivers, but I have some receiving options that I really do like. I didn't really want Cooper, didn't really want Pickens, didn't really want Tank Dell. I'm seeing some options that I do like, and I'm looking at Keenan Allen, and I'm looking at T. Higgins. And the truth of it is, I'm kind of hoping one of them comes back to me, and I can just scoop up both of them. But who do I like more? it's really tough because I really do like Keenan Allen's value. They traded for him because they wanted him. He had one of his most successful seasons of his career last year. But the buzz at the camps at Odunze is really forming a connection with Caleb Williams. So a little worried about that, but he's just so talented. As for T. Higgins, though, that's your number 2 receiver on the Bengals, another very high-powered offense. Joe Burrow, one of only like 2 or 3 quarterbacks in the league that could realistically throw for, 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns. So I'm actually going to lock in T. Higgins here. This is a guy who was going within the top 30 in most leagues up until this point. And now I see that Keenan Allen did come back to me, so I have a decision to make. So my options are either Keenan Allen, you see Rome Odunze down the board a little bit. If this was me and Nick's league, and in me and Nick's league, the 6th round does start keepers, I would draft Odunze. But this is not me and Nick's league. I don't like the tight end product at the moment right now. I'm going to wait on tight end. I'm going to draft Keenan Allen. He was on my team last year, and in me and Nick's league, I did have, I believe, the best record team through 10 weeks, and Keenan Allen was a big part of that. My team did end up missing the playoffs due to multiple injuries, players falling off. It was a really bad season because I ended up with not getting any of the good waivers through the first 10 weeks, so I don't even have a good keeper option. It was the worst possible way that my season probably could have gone. But it is what it is. That was last year, and that was my pick. So I'm okay with Keenan Allen being my wide receiver 3 and going in a flex spot.
You got exactly what you asked for. You said it, and you got it. You said, I want T. Higgins or Keenan Allen. Took T. Higgins. Keenan Allen fell. That's perfect. You don't get that often in fantasy.
No, you don't.
It usually puts you on tilt when it doesn't happen, but you locked in there. I've talked about this guy probably on every episode of the pod this season. Rashee Rice, I don't need to go into all the details, but week 12 on, wide receiver 4, was a rookie. Suspension doesn't look like it's happening this season. If you're telling me for 6 weeks as a rookie with Patrick Mahomes, you were the wide receiver 4, and then we're an electric option in the playoffs for Patrick Mahomes, I'm going to take you in my fantasy draft this late. I think it's such a lock. And now, like Nick mentioned earlier, got a decision to make. I have one last flex spot to fill. I have a quarterback spot to fill. I do like later value quarterbacks this year. So Dak Prescott, unfortunately, you're not making the cut. Kyler Murray not making the cut, even though I think his value is very good. The 2 or 3 guys that I'm really looking at, Jaden Reed, I think has a real opportunity to be the wide receiver 1 for Jordan Love, and he was very explosive for a few weeks last year. My concern is Christian Watson did out-target him when both of them were on the field last year, but he has such injury concern, and he got injured in training camp already. He's missed some practices with it, so that's a concern. Calvin Ridley, another guy a little further down the board, I've talked about a number of times as a steal in drafts. And the guy that I think I'm actually going to take, he was my kind of league winner last year, Raheem Mostert. And it's a bold strategy to go stack Devon Achane.
Taking your handcuff.
Yeah, I lock in a handcuff, but this backfield last year averaged the most fantasy points per game. So it's kind of like if I told you Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, you'd be pretty good with it. Maybe it lowers your ceiling, but when you're on a top 5 offense in football, and Nick and I both think that this team is a top 5 offense in football and for fantasy, and you have a guy in the RB2 up until he got hurt, and it wasn't like he got hurt in week 2, week 3, he got hurt in week 15. I locked down what's probably a top 3 backfield in fantasy football, maybe the number 1 backfield in fantasy. In this spot, again, like Nick mentioned, handcuff there for Mostert or Achane. One goes down, the other one's a clear locked and loaded top 10 running back for the rest of the year. So I'm very comfortable doing that. I know it might be a little bit of a hot take to take 2 running backs on the same team, but if you took Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt a couple years ago, Kamara, Ingram, Gibbs and Montgomery, like there's been successful backfields that do it, and this backfield just did it a year ago. So I'm happy to stack them.
So there's a real drop off at running back here. There goes starter Tony Pollard, who's going way too late. Nick Chubb, way too late. And then there's Zach Moss. Chris Evans just went down with, I think it was an Achilles. Yeah. He's out for the year. So Zach Moss will not be going in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Zach Moss will not be going in round 7 in your drafts. I actually did want to take another running back just to solidify, but that's not going to happen. So here are my options here. I'm actually going to go with Jaden Reed for the reasons that Nick spoke about, and I also do like his production. I'm pretty high on him. I was thinking about going tight end there, but I knew that I could get Jaden Reed and have a tight end come back to me that I could deal with. So looking at David Njoku, who had a breakout year last year, and looking at Jake Ferguson, who also did have a very successful year last year, going into his third year now. I'm going to look at the board real quick. TJ Hawkinson, Dallas Goedert, Dalton Schultz, Cole Kmet. There's some other decent options here. I do want to I'm at 1, 2, 3. I'm at 4 receivers here. I'm going to look down the board a little bit on receiver. There's some other receiving options that I do like. But I'm going to go with Lade McConkey, as I think he gives me the highest upside here for points. He's going to be my wide receiver 5. He'll ride the bench for a little bit. But Justin Herbert loves to throw the ball. He's a stat sheet stuffer, and somebody has to catch the ball over there now with no Keenan Allen, no Mike Williams. Somebody has to step up. I'm going to take that chance on Lade McConkey, and I'm actually going to sacrifice the tight end and hope that either Jaden Reed or Lade McConkey does have a breakout year. If I'm getting one of those receivers as a breakout in my flex spot, they would score more points throughout the season than Njoku or Jake Ferguson would.
I'm a little upset because I really wanted Lade McConkey.
I heard the sigh. We know somebody that sighs a lot. I heard the trademark.
Yeah, I think Lade's got such a big opportunity. Slot receiver for Justin Herbert, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, both top 10 receivers in points per game.
Keon Coleman's staring you in the face now. That's another option I really like. I took him in my dynasty league.
100%, and that's kind of the one. I'm in between two guys. He's one of them. My only hesitation is Keon Coleman would then be my first bench player. And I would need to put him and Dalton Kincaid in the same game. So if you have that James Cook, Josh Allen touchdown, like that's really going to be a killer for your fantasy team. So I am going to go down a little bit to another rookie receiver that I do like. I'm going to go with Brian Thomas. I think Christian Kirk, we've seen, is now a little dinged up in camp. Gabe Davis, we have not seen anything from, and there's a lot of targets to go around from Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars, who, you could say what you want about Trevor, whether you think he's good, whether you don't think he's good. He did fill the stat sheets enough for Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley to both be effective fantasy receivers. Travis Etienne put up a top 5 season. Evan Ingram was a top 5 tight end. So Nick and I talked about the offenses that are best for fantasy football. They might not be a top 10 offense in football, but Trevor Lawrence has managed to give his players good fantasy production. So I'm going to take the shot on Brian Thomas, the guy they traded up for in the first round.
I like all the rookie receivers in some way or form. And I think the only one whose draft position I'm really against is Malik Neighbors.
Yeah. I'm the same exact way. Him, Adunze worries me as the 3, but the reports out of camp have been that he's been the number 2 favorite target behind DJ Moore. Keenan Allen's been struggling against the top corners in practice. And obviously Jalen Johnson, not NFL 100 cornerback, but apparently really good.
But just remember, NFL 100, your best player is not Patrick Mahomes. So there you go.
Correct. Your best player is not Patrick Mahomes.
Yep.
So looking at the board, I do still like some of these later quarterbacks. I am gonna wait. It's a little bit of a risk. But Caleb, Goff, Jaden Daniels, any of those 3 make it back to me in the next round, that is absolutely my pick. I am going to continue to look for depth at flex, like we mentioned earlier. McCaffrey, injury history, Devon Achane, Cooper Kupp, Raheem Mostert. Those are 4 guys I got in my starting lineup right now. So I am going to continue to look for depth. And like I mentioned, Keon Coleman, I love the player. I love the pick. I'm going to pass on him. I'm going to go with Nick's guy, Jackson Smith-Njigba. He has been dominant in camp so far. He looked really good last year, and he did not fill the stats like you wanted to. That was one of those guys who it was like clearly a good football player, but not good for fantasy because of the options ahead of him. The Seahawks ran the least amount of plays per game last year with Pete Carroll.
Sounds like a Pete Carroll team to me.
I expect that the Ravens last year were a little bit closer to middle of the pack. You bring the DCOC over there. I think that the Seahawks are going to step up and have a lot more plays per game, which is going to hopefully boost the fantasy production all around. So Kenneth Walker, DK Metcalf, and JSN, who I think is going to overtake Tyler Lockett this year. Although we do say every year that someone's going to overtake Tyler Lockett, and that dude just sticks like glue, man. You cannot
finds a way. Yeah,
he is. Yeah, he's always there.
I'm going to take TJ Hawkinson here. I know he's going to start the season on the PUP list, so he'll be out for a couple of games. And once he comes back, I'm looking at my starting lineup here, and I'm really liking my starting lineup. So I'm okay with sacrificing that for a couple games. I did want to take my man Zeke on the wrap. Nick knows about Zeke when it comes to Madden. I do want to take Zeke on the wrap, but that's not going to happen. So I do miss out on Ezekiel Elliott. I'm not liking anybody that's in front of me. I could go with Dallas Goedert and get myself another tight end. But I think I really want to get another running back just so I have one to be safe. So my options here, Gus Edwards, Blake Corum, Chase Brown, Jerome Ford, Zach Charbonnet. I'm going to go with Jerome Ford. He's going to start the season as the starter for the Browns. I know that, Nick Chubb's going to be back, but he's coming off a pretty bad injury. So do I think Chubb will remain the starter? Yes, but it's going to be tough for Chubb to come back to form. I think there's a chance Jerome Ford remains in this offense, and that's an okay handcuff. I was also looking at Gus Edwards since we don't know who's going to be the starter for the Chargers. But again, that's another issue. So I'm okay with that.
So if you are watching the podcast visual version, you just saw me do a big face palm. As I said 1 round ago, I want Caleb Williams, Jared
4
Goff,
quarterbacks are gone.
And Jaden Daniels, the number 1 guy that I would have wanted out of the 3, goes the pick right before me. So
I think you got to go like Caleb and then Stafford.
Well, Caleb's off the board too. So
I misread that. Okay. I mean, I'm liking Stafford there. I know you like the Rams offense too. I'm liking Stafford there for you.
Yeah, and especially having that cup stack is definitely good for me. I'm going to play the board a little bit. He's not going to go in these next 2 picks. And I'm going to go with Chase Brown, who he's currently listed as the RB1 on the Bengals depth chart. That doesn't typically mean anything for the first round of depth charts, but for him to be there, to me, says he's getting a role in this offense. And like Nick mentioned earlier, Chris Evans goes down. Opportunity for 2 running backs. Joe Mixon, the RB6 last year. So tremendous opportunity. And I am going to pull the trigger on Matthew Stafford. Stat sheet stuffer. I'm going to put him and tag him, partner him with Cooper Kupp in my starting lineup. So pretty good value for the 2 of them. I do wish I got Jaden Daniels to fall that 1 extra pick. But we'll take it. I can't complain having Matthew Stafford this late.
I'm going to take a little bit of a risk here, and I'm going to take rookie tight end Ben Sinnott for the Commanders. He's getting good reviews at a camp. Paired up with Jaden Daniels, the rookie quarterbacks do usually target tight ends, so I'll roll him out there for a couple weeks if needed. I'm okay with it. There's a lot of receivers here that I do like, but there actually is a running back that I want to take a shot on. That's Rico Dowdle. I know I was just talking about my man Zeke, but Rico Dowdle is a guy who's actually getting a lot of love over there at Cowboys camp and may end up being the Cowboys starting running back at some point. So I'm okay with taking the shot on Rico Dowdle. This is a 14-round draft. We are not doing defense and kickers. We don't need to. I mean, the players is what we want to hear about. So here you go. So Nick has 3 more picks. I have 2 more picks.
Yep, and taking a look, my weakest position groups right now, I probably need the wide receiver depth, the running back depth, and Matthew Stafford being this late in the draft, I could use another quarterback. So I know the team after me is probably looking for a backup with Brock Purdy. I'm going to take Kirk Cousins, who Nick and I are all in on the Atlanta Falcons offense. So there's good upside there. I'll play the matchup between Stafford and Cousins. That works for me. And then, like I said, I'm going to look for a running back and a wide receiver depth piece. The running back is got to be somebody that I think later in the season can take over. I don't need guaranteed workload. I need somebody who has the upside of taking over at the position. So
Jaleel McLaughlin or Kamani Vidal?
I'm going to go with Marshawn Lloyd. And Josh Jacobs, I love him. I think he's going to be phenomenal for fantasy. I think he's very undervalued on some platforms. Sleeper, I think, has him the most accurate. But the reports are he's been an inefficient runner. He was inefficient last year. He has not lived up to his 1 season wonder for fantasy. So if he does not break out like I expect him to, if he does not have that monstrous year, there's no saying that they couldn't transition to a rookie running back. And A.J. Dillon has not been great the entire time that he's been there. We expected him to take over for Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones was there for so many years because A.J. Dillon could not handle that workload. So I do think there's some opportunity for an offense that was pretty electric last season, with Jordan Love on the back half of the year.
I'm going to take Troy Franklin. Could be the best receiving option over there for the Denver Broncos. And if Bo Nix is starting, that's his college receiver. So I'm okay with that in round 13. And then I'm going to go back to the running backs, and I am going to take Kamani Vidal, who may end up being the starting running back for the Chargers by the end of the season. If not, that's my 14th round pick, and I'm not going to be upset if I don't keep him. So Nick's last pick.
It's the last pick of the draft. You never really know who's going to hit. There's a few guys that I do like. I like Roman Wilson. I like Jermaine Burton. Two teams that have nailed wide receiver for the last few years. Steelers.
I just got Burton in my dynasty. I'm big on Burton. Big on Burton in dynasty.
Steelers have always gotten wide receiver right. Bengals, I mean, look at their last few drafts. Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. Before that, AJ Green. I mean, organizationally, these two franchises always get wide receiver
Ochocinco.
Right. Ochocinco, of course. So we're looking at the two. I think you can go either way, but I'm always going to lean in. This is a big piece of fantasy advice for me. If it's a close decision, go with the better offense. And the better offense is the Cincinnati Bengals.
All right. What do you think of your draft from the 2 spot?
I'm pretty happy with it. I'm going to be honest. I'm happy with how it winded up, considering I went to running backs. I like going here. I like going 0. And Christian McCaffrey, I got the upside of Achane. I could absolutely stack Mostert and Achane. I'm comfortable doing that. Rashee Rice, I've said repeatedly, one of the steals of the draft. Dalton Kincaid, I think, breaks out. I just prayed that Jaden Daniels would have made it back to me. And I'm going to take Jaden Daniels in too many leagues this year, especially Dynasty. And he just could not get there. So a quarterback don't love, but I do think I have 2 guys that if I play the matchup right, will be good enough for top 10 weeks in fantasy.
I think my team's okay, but my concern is I don't think I have anybody who's really going to finish top 3 at their own position. Maybe Lamar Jackson. I mean, obviously, so many good receivers went that it's Garrett Wilson. No slighting on him, but there's just so many good receivers available. I give Barkley an edge over Jonathan Taylor. Wish I had gotten Barkley. I think my team is good and productive, but I think my team is very safe floor and not a lot of high ceiling. So I'd have to hope that anybody from Jaden Reed down would have to really produce for me. And I would really need TJ Hawkinson to come back in week 4 or 6 or whatever the week is and really be productive for my team to really win a championship. But it's just kind of the way that the board kind of fell. And that's just how it goes sometimes. So, all right, that is Mock Draft 4.0 for us. Hopefully you enjoyed this show. Let us know on social media what you thought of our picks. Maybe you're picking from one of these slots and maybe you're considering certain guys. If you have any questions, definitely hit us up on our social medias, Primetime FF Pod. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube. It's Primetime Fantasy Podcast. Put that little bell icon on so you get notifications every time we drop a new episode or go live during the NFL season. Make sure you're subscribed to us on all audio streaming platforms or on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcast, Anchor, anywhere where you get your podcast, you could find us, the Primetime Fantasy Podcast. The next time you hear from us, we'll be giving you our MVPs, breakouts, and busts for the 2024 fantasy football season for every single position, so you don't want to miss that. We'll talk to you guys very soon.